Hi.
Good morning.
Bonjour. Hello. Hola. Ni hao. Howdy. Explain the environment.
Creativity is a social experience. You're not creative alone.
Today we're going to talk about things like trust and teams, and this is something that I've been studying for the past 15 years of my life.
Welcome to Knowledge at HEC's Masterclass Reskill Series number 8, What Hinders Aspirations for Women in Management. Over the past few decades, we have observed that women are generally underrepresented in positions of management, and researchers, practitioners, academics have been attempting to approach this question from different angles. Today, to present her perspective is HEC Paris Assistant Professor of Management and Human Resources, Ekaterina Netchaeva. Her academic background is in organizational behavior and psychology. Her research has been published in various academic journals as well as various media outlets. And in addition to her research, she teaches organizational behavior, leadership, diversity management, high-performance teams to master's and PhD students at HEC Paris. We're delighted to have her with us today to discuss some of the elements which hinder women to aspire for high management roles. And as this is a live session, don't forget to prepare some questions for Professor. We'll have a Q&A session at the end. Without much further ado, over to you, Professor.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ben, for the introduction. And good afternoon, everybody. I'm absolutely delighted to be here today. As mentioned, my research focuses on women's experiences in the workplace. And one of the questions and topics that I've been really interested in lately is trying to understand the leadership gender gap. Specifically, why is it that there are fewer women than men in leadership roles? Now, over the past several decades, the dominant view over this question has been that it is the prejudice and discrimination that kept women away from these leadership roles. Specifically, organizational decision makers, for various reasons, tend not to want to see women in these roles. And while undeniably true, we wondered if there might be another explanation for this gap. Specifically, we wanted to focus on gender differences in leadership aspirations. In other words, we wanted to investigate whether women are less interested in pursuing these roles compared to men. We thought that this was a very important question to investigate because the gap tends to persist despite the widespread adoption of policies and programs meant to combat discrimination by offering women various opportunities, sponsors, and trainings. So how did we address this question? Are women less interested in leadership opportunities compared to men? Well, to do that, we conducted a meta-analysis. So what is it? A meta-analysis is known as a study of studies. So to do that, first we conducted a thorough search of the existing research on the topic. And we were looking specifically for studies that measured the levels of women's and men's aspirations in leadership. Then we performed an analysis which aggregated these gender differences across all of the studies that were done on the topic to produce an overall effect size, an overall gender difference in aspirations. And what did we find? Well, we found that across 174 studies and almost 140,000 participants, men do significantly show higher interest in pursuing leadership roles compared to women. And this confirmed our hypothesis that gender bias and discrimination is not the only explanation for the leadership gender gap. Our study also revealed the following insights, which we thought were very important. First, we found that across the last 6 decades, so the first study on this topic was done in the 1960s, women consistently show lower interest in these leadership roles, and men consistently show a higher interest in these roles. We also found that the gap tends to be smaller in occupations and organizations that are female-dominated or more gender-balanced compared to the organizations which are more male-dominated. And we also found that the gap tends to increase after college days. So at around high school, boys and girls tend to show similar levels of aspirations, but that tends to change after college graduation. Men's aspirations levels tend to continue to increase, while women's levels of aspirations tend to plateau or even drop at around this time. So what might explain these results? This was a question that was posed to our LinkedIn audience, and a lot of you have offered your answers. So let me talk about that. So unfortunately, the method that we used to understand this question did not allow us to test for the different mechanisms. However, my research team, my co-authors and I have speculated on possible factors that might explain these results. So what are our speculations? The first reason which I think might be at play is the process known as self-stereotyping. What is it? Well, self-stereotyping is a process wherein we, and by we I mean men and women, internalize gender-specific stereotypes, the social expectations for how men and women are supposed to act. So for women, this might mean being helpful, kind, supportive, nice, exhibiting cooperative behaviors, whereas for men, it means being more powerful, assertive, and dominant. At the end of this process, people start to use these gender stereotypes as a compass to guide their interests, behaviors, and activities to be more in line with social expectations, while sometimes forfeiting their genuine interests if they conflict with these expectations. Now, we did not come up with the notion of self-stereotyping ourselves. Past studies have drawn upon this notion to explain gender differences in, for example, delegation. So we know that female leaders are much less comfortable delegating tasks and activities to their subordinates compared to men. Why? Because they feel that they should be nice and kind to their subordinates, and it's not right to tell them what to do. Self-stereotyping has also been used to explain gender differences in negotiation outcomes. Women are less excited about negotiations. Women are more hesitant to ask for what they want in negotiations compared to men. Again, because those things tend to conflict with the social expectations for how women should act. Self-stereotyping, as another example, has been shown to affect the difference in the likelihood of taking on non-promotable tasks. So, for example, women are much more likely to be willing to organize a birthday celebration or to be on some sort of committee in the workplace, things that have nothing to do with advancing their competencies and increasing their chances of promotion. And men are less willing to do that. And again, that's consistent with the gender-specific stereotypes. So we thought that this might be a reason that would explain the gender difference in interest in leadership aspirations. Because leadership positions require people to want to take charge and to be assertive and to be dominant, this is much more consistent with male gender-specific stereotypes compared to female stereotypes. And so we thought that men might be more inclined to want to take these roles compared to women. So this is the first reason. The second reason that could potentially affect women's interest in leadership roles is the sorts of experience that they have in their early career days. What do I mean by this? Well, past work has showed that women routinely experience mistreatment and prejudice in the workplace. So, for example, women are less likely to be invited to lunches with management. Women are less likely to be given interesting tasks at work, and women are less likely to be listened to, and instead are often ignored or disregarded when they provide their feedback. And so we thought that these experiences might dissuade women from entering leadership roles. A woman might think, well, if these are the experiences that I have when I'm at the lower organizational level, what will happen as I advance the organizational ladder? Will I see more of that? And these early career experiences is what we also might think might explain the diverging gap after college days. So after college, women are more likely to start taking on part-time positions. They start taking on internship positions where they get first-hand experience of what it's like to be mistreated, and what it's like to be experiencing prejudice. And so this, we think, might serve as an impetus for not wanting to go up the leadership track. So this is the second reason. And then the final reason that might lower women's interest in leadership roles is simply the difficulty balancing work and family. So between the ages of 25 and 45, we know that women are experiencing greater caretaking responsibilities compared to men. And so soberly assessing the fact that these responsibilities require time and effort might lower women's interest in roles that might similarly take a lot of time and effort. And so realizing that they don't simply have the capacity or the bandwidth to perform leadership roles might be a reason for women to not show as much interest in these roles compared to men. So this is my research on gender difference in leadership aspirations. Since organizations or organizational decision makers can't really directly affect self-stereotyping or can't really directly affect work-life balance, I thought I would use the remaining time to talk about some of the things organizations can do to make women feel more included since early career experiences we think might be a reason that women opt out from leadership roles. So what might make women feel more included and happier in organizations? There are three broad categories of intervention. All of these, by the way, are evidence-based and have been shown to have empirical support in past studies. So these are the three categories: diversity recruitment, diversity training, and mentorship relationships. Let me talk about each one of them separately. So what goes under the diversity recruitment label? Examples of interventions here include advertising or featuring diversity in the recruitment material. So this, for example, might take the form of displaying certain statistics of how many women are in the organizations or how many women are in leadership roles in a specific organization, or simply showing pictures on an appropriate web page. So that's one. The second thing that can be done is being careful, intentional, and almost strategic about the language that is being used in the recruitment ads. So from past studies, we know that women are less comfortable with phrasing when they see that a company is determined to deliver on certain goals, and they're much more comfortable with phrasing that says we are committed to deliver. So the word determined is more masculine, and word committed is more aligned with those gender stereotypes that we talked about earlier. Another intervention that can be done that also falls under the diversity recruitment category is instituting a quota-based system. So this is a system that's common in some countries, not all, but research on the effectiveness of quota-based system is a little bit conflicting, it's inconsistent. While initially a quota-based system might seem like a good idea and might invite more women to apply for positions, it comes with its drawbacks and disadvantages. So what are these disadvantages? I think it's important to mention them. So the first one is that the non-beneficiaries of the quota-based system, so men in this case, might view women as simply diversity hires, and that might lower their opinion of women, of their female colleagues. Another drawback is that women themselves might see themselves as less competent. They're not sure why they were hired in a position. Are they hired because they were good, or are they hired because the company was forced to hire them? And finally, we know that quota-based systems tends to disrupt work-family balance, which, as we've talked earlier, is something that a lot of women struggle to find this delicate balance. So quota-based system comes with its advantages and disadvantages, and so it's very important to be careful in how this is used. The other thing that falls under the diversity recruitment label is ensuring that gender bias is eliminated from the hiring practices. So there are two interventions here that we can talk about. The first one is using blind evaluation, where the gender of the candidate is stripped from the application materials. And this is something that a lot of people have talked about, and this is something that's quite well known. But the other thing that is basically brand new in terms of research is the notion of joint evaluation. So this is the idea where candidates are evaluated as part of a group rather than singly. When candidates are evaluated as a group, the focus tends to fall on the candidate's performance, whereas when the candidate is evaluated by themselves, the focus tends to fall on their gender. And so in an effort to dissuade people from focusing on gender, evaluation as a group seems or has been shown to be a good strategy. So this is the diversity recruitment category of interventions. Let's move on to talking about the diversity training. What has been shown to be effective here? So here we have several types of training that prior organizations have tried and have found to be effective in research. The first one is employee orientation program, which helps people with understanding advantages of diversity. Another type of diversity training is skill training, where people might be trained on conflict resolution skills, sexual harassment management skills, and communication skills. Another one is awareness training, where people learn about the roles of stereotypes and in decision-making in organizations. Another one is self-regulation training for people who are motivated to change. So this, for example, might take the form of people setting goals early in the morning in their journal and then reflecting back on how those goals have been met later in the day, and doing this for several weeks has been shown to be effective in changing people's behavior. And lastly, there's recommendation of instituting strong organizational norms by emphasizing more transparency and meritocracy. Here, though, you have to be careful because research that came out of MIT identified what's now known as the meritocracy paradox. So what this means is that organizational efforts to promote meritocracy as a core organizational value has been shown to lead unintended negative consequences, which might manifest in women receiving lower bonuses and generally negative treatment. Apparently, efforts to promote meritocracy makes people feel like they're objective and unbiased, which lowers their individual guard and makes them be more likely to express their personal biases. So we have to be careful. In general, diversity training has the strongest effect on cognitive learning, so people understand why diversity is important and why we have to be nice to everybody and inclusive, but it doesn't elicit much change in terms of the behavior. What's more, the effects of diversity training tend to diminish over time. The good news, though, is that longer training elicits more positive reactions, which leads to stronger outcomes at the end. The final category of interventions that I wanted to discuss has to do with mentorship relationships. So mentorship relationships is something that can make people feel more included. And past work has shown that, for example, formal mentorship relationships are less effective than informal ones. So the formal ones are the ones that have been initiated by the organization, and people just simply feel less identification between the mentor and employee, whereas informal ones that have been formed spontaneously are more beneficial. How do mentorship relationships work? Well, the mentor and the mentee meet once a week, once a month, a few times a year, and it's helpful because the mentor influences women's self-confidence, it influences their ability to socialize, it expands their network, people feel more included, and also mentors can help the decision maker's bias, a decision maker who's in charge of the promotion. So their bias might be reduced. So the mentor might talk to the decision maker and say, well, look, you're being a little bit biased here toward this particular woman, so that can be helpful. Just on a last note, in terms of mentorship relationships, past research has identified that there's one specific danger that needs to be kept in mind. Sometimes mentors raise unrealistically high expectations of their mentees, which might make women opt out and not wanting to take on leadership roles. So mentorship relationships are great, but they have to be treated carefully, and there are a lot of considerations here. This is all I have for you today. At this point, I'm happy to take any questions about anything that I've said in my presentations or anything related to the topic. Thank you.
And we're back with Professor Netchaeva. I mean, first of all, I just want to thank you so much for your time, your energy, for having shared your research with us today. And I wonder if you could indulge us and our audience just one more time for some questions that we've received on what you've just delivered. So our first question is going to be, do you think that the relatively low levels of aspirations in women would be the same across countries?
So thank you for this question. I should have mentioned that the meta-analysis that I've done with my co-authors was done in the context of the US participants. So we really didn't focus on other countries. So my answer would be speculative at this point. My guess, however, is that there would be a gap in aspirations in all the countries. Because one of the reasons for the aspirations gap, as I've talked about, is the self-stereotyping process, which takes place in all countries to a smaller extent or to a larger extent. And so in all countries, no matter where you are, women and men internalize their gender-specific expectations and they act accordingly with these expectations. So my answer would be yes, it would be the same. Maybe smaller, maybe larger, depending on the country, but yes, overall.
Okay. So at the beginning, we mentioned how practitioners and academics alike are trying to approach this issue from different angles. So I just wonder, is there anything that educators can do to hamper the self-stereotyping process, which you mentioned before?
This is a very good question. So this is not my research, this is based on what I know from past research. The number one intervention that can be done to hamper the self-stereotyping process is introducing both men and women to counter-stereotypical role models. We know that even brief exposure to an ad where a woman is working, for example, or a woman is a pilot, or a woman is a doctor, so professions which we associate more with being a man, typically or stereotypically, increases women's aspirations. They see that it's possible to aspire to something different than what a typical woman is like, and so the aspirations change. So if women get exposed to these counter-stereotypical role models consistently over the course of their lifetime, I would expect that the aspirations would be matching those of men's.
Okay. And talking about aspirations, I mean, really for us all, what can we all do, women and men alike, contribute to the better treatment of women and to aspire to greater gender equality in the workplace?
So this is a great question. I do think that the better treatment of women has to come from two angles. Not only should organizations try to make women feel more comfortable, but there are things that women can also do themselves to make themselves feel more respected in the workplace, or to demonstrate this respect. So for women, the number one recommendation is to be able to balance the displays of warmth and competence. If a woman acts too much like she's a man, if she's too abrasive, she's too manly, she will get called up on that and she'll likely experience backlash. We've seen plenty of studies demonstrating that if a woman is has too many masculine characteristics, there's backlash. People don't like that. At the same time, if the woman is too feminine, too nice, too kind, too gentle, then people really like this kind of colleague. However, they don't think highly of her. They are not likely to think that she's competent and she's able to take on a leadership role. So the goal here is to balance the displays of warmth and competence, being nice and being competent. So being competent means being always prepared for the meetings, staying late, or being able to answer questions, just really being ready to take on tasks, being willing to take on challenging opportunities, things like that. And I think to the extent that women are able to balance those two things, they'll receive better treatment in the workplace.
Are you optimistic that the gender gap aspirations will eventually close?
This is a great question as well. So we've started seeing a lot of implementation of various DEI initiatives in the last several years. This has not been a large push in the decades prior to that. However, lately, a lot of organizations are excited about taking on these initiatives. And so to the extent that this will continue, and to the extent that women and men are presented with counter-stereotypic role models, hopefully the gap will close at some point. I'm not sure how close in the future, but hopefully it will.
Professor, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. We'll see you next time for a Reskill Masterclass with HEC Paris. Thanks for joining us. Goodbye now.
Thank you.
Hi.
Good morning.
Bonjour. Hello. Hola. Ni hao. Howdy.
Explain the environment.
Creativity is a social experience. You're not creative alone.
Today we're going to talk about things like trust and teams, and this is something that I've been studying for the past 15 years of my life.